Animal welfare is an important aspect of farming, and the highest standards for the care of animals should be the goal of everyone involved in the food production chain. When livestock are transported, there are numerous ways in which their welfare can be put at risk. The major responsibility for the welfare of animals in transit rests with the driver of the vehicle. UK and EU legislation emphasises the importance of driver training and competence to ensure the welfare of livestock during transport and avoid unnecessary suffering. This includes driving in a manner that will keep the livestock as calm as possible, allow them to rest, and reduce the risk of injury. During any livestock journey, there will be features along the route that have the potential to disturb the animals. The degree to which this occurs will be influenced by how the driver tackles these situations. Providing livestock with a smooth journey is less likely to interrupt resting or have a detrimental effect on their well-being or meat quality. This DVD will highlight the main areas where driver behaviour may put the welfare of livestock at risk during road transport. Ways in which the driver can minimise or avoid such risks will be illustrated. A 7.5-tonne, single-deck, non-articulated livestock vehicle was fitted with video cameras that simultaneously recorded the speedometer, the driver's view of the road ahead, the driver, and the livestock. At the same time, a triaxial accelerometer mounted under the floor of the livestock section monitored the longitudinal, transverse, and vertical accelerations produced as the vehicle was driven. A GPS receiver recorded the speed and geographical location of the vehicle. Groups of either 5 cattle, 10 calves, 10 pigs, or 10 sheep were transported at a time within European Union recommended space allowances. All animals were spray marked using a coloured number system for individual identification. The livestock were transported along a route divided into 2 journeys of approximately equal duration and separated by a driver rest break. Each journey stage comprised travel on B roads, A roads, and motorways. The journeys lasted for between 5 and 7 hours total travelling time. 2 drivers drove either 3 or 5 journeys each for each animal type. Driving events are a driver's responses to situations that may be encountered during the course of a journey. They can generate forces that are experienced by the driver, passengers, and livestock within a moving vehicle. What the sitting driver perceives in the cab may be very different to what the freestanding livestock experience in the rear of the vehicle. Driving events may cause livestock to make postural adjustments. Accelerating away from a standstill can cause livestock to lose their balance. When the vehicle pulls away, it generates a longitudinal G-force that pulls the animals towards the back of the vehicle. This sequence demonstrates another acceleration, but this one is of a greater intensity and induces a slide in the cattle. The cattle have very little time to adjust their footing to the motion of the vehicle, and they slide from one end of the pen to the other. This graphic shows the change in g-force when the vehicle accelerates. A longitudinal g-force can also be brought about by deceleration. This occurs during braking. In this clip, the vehicle is leaving the motorway and the driver brakes to slow the vehicle down. The corresponding graphic shows the deceleration and explains the resultant slide that the calves endure. A deceleration may also occur when a driver removes their foot from the accelerator pedal in preparation for changing gear. Here, the sitting pig loses balance and falls following a change of gear. Livestock can also experience a change in acceleration after the driver has changed gear, as the gears re-engage with the engine. Cornering on bends, turning at junctions, and roundabouts all produce transverse g-forces. High-intensity lateral accelerations can have a dramatic effect on livestock. In this clip, whilst the vehicle is cornering on a roundabout, Animal 4, marked in orange, falls at the side of the pen, and Animal 1, marked in black, slides across to the other side of the vehicle. The quality of the surface upon which the vehicle is travelling will vary along the route. For example, many route plans will start on farm, where the road is likely to be an unpaved and therefore uneven track with potholes. On this type of surface, the livestock can experience stronger vertical accelerations. In comparison, a motorway will have a high-quality paved surface with very few potholes. This surface will produce relatively weak vertical accelerations and cause fewer disturbances to the livestock. Rather than any single driving event, it is often a combination of events that are associated with an animal losing its stability. Braking on a corner causes these calves to lose balance and fall. When approaching a corner, a driver will often have to brake and may even have to change down a gear in order to travel efficiently at the slower speed. When a series of events happen in close succession like this, it limits the ability of the livestock to maintain their stability. The likelihood of encountering rapid successions of driving events can vary depending on the type of road. B roads are likely to have many corners. In addition, minor roads frequently intersect with other roads. The driver will brake when preparing to stop the vehicle at these junctions, and then accelerate away from one road onto the next. There may also be narrow roads that require braking and pulling over when traffic approaches from the opposite direction. In this clip, braking causes the cattle to slide towards the front of the livestock area, and the animal nearest the camera becomes trapped between the partition and the neighbouring animal. The relatively poor quality surface of minor roads in comparison with A roads or motorways means that livestock may also experience more vibration and jolting. All of the aforementioned factors require frequent gear changes in order to cope with the constantly changing speed of the vehicle. When travelling along an A road, a driver is likely to encounter traffic control features and congestion. This leads to a high frequency of accelerations, gear changes and braking as the vehicle repeatedly starts and stops over short distances. In comparison, a motorway has a high quality road surface and does not usually require substantial periods of braking or rapid acceleration, hard cornering or frequent gear changes. As a result, livestock experience fewer losses of balance on motorways compared with A roads and B roads, despite travelling at a much faster speed. For example, the frequency of losses of balance for calves was always lowest on the motorway, irrespective of the stage of the journey and the driver. In this clip, which is shown at 6 times actual speed, the cattle are rarely disturbed by driving events on the motorway and stand still. Whereas on B and A roads, the continual exposure to driving events of a greater intensity leads to frequent bouts of movement. When changing position in a vehicle travelling along B or A roads, livestock may be prone to losing their balance or falling. The less eventful motorway travel therefore encourages sheep and calves to lie down and pigs to sit. Some animals may even ruminate. Resting may be affected by the manner in which the vehicle is driven. In this clip, the calf at the back lies down when the vehicle comes to a halt. The calf continues lying whilst the vehicle waits for a clear passage across the junction. However, after the vehicle accelerates, the calf is disturbed and stands up again. The restricted amount of space used during transport limits the room within which postural adjustments can be made. resting livestock may be disturbed by the movement of other animals. In this clip, the pig at the back has limited room and it mounts, disturbing the other standing pigs. It also knocks a sitting pig over. In some cases, disturbing another animal can induce an aggressive response. In this clip, the pig at the back attempts to lie down in between two other resting animals. One of these pigs delivers a head knock to it. Livestock may also disturb one another when they struggle to control their movement and the position of their feet during a driving event. In this clip, when the vehicle drives around the corner, it causes a slide, and pig number 3, marked in green, is pushed over the backs of two pigs that are lying down. These pigs then sit up, and one stands up. When the recumbent calves are trampled by others standing next to them, they may respond. Kick out, and quickly get up. Injuries might occur when livestock do not have sufficient room to manoeuvre properly, particularly during driving events. For example, in this clip, one of the animals is standing with its head down when it experiences a loss of balance and then tries to move forwards. This situation then puts the other animal at risk of injury should it fall over before it can regain control of its limb. This is exactly the case in this example when animal 2 lifts its head under the foreleg of animal 4 and tips it over. Animal 5 then stumbles over 4's body. When a loss of balance causes the standing cattle to trample 4, it struggles to its feet. In this sequence, when the vehicle travels round a corner, animal 5, marked in blue, loses balance and tramples animal 2. At a subsequent corner, calf 5 is pulled back towards calf 2 and stumbles upon and then falls on top of it. Another calf then tramples both of these calves while trying to regain a stable position itself. Calf 5 is left lying on its side after the incident. In this clip, the calf on the floor is being trampled by the others above and around it. When it tries to get up, it stimulates the calf above it to mount. But when the vehicle corners, the calf falls from its position onto the floor. Despite the potential of driving events to disturb livestock, their effects can be influenced by driving style. Different driving styles along the same route will lead to a difference in the ability of the livestock to cope with the driving event at hand. For example, compared with driver A, driver B's journeys when transporting cattle were characterised by more frequent lateral accelerations of between 0.5 g and 2 g when cornering on A roads during the second stage of the journey. In this clip with driver B, the left corner results in losses of balance for all cattle and a fall for animal 3. Animal 3 attempts to stand up but falls again on the second corner. Animal 5 and then Animal 2 fall with it. In contrast, when driver A takes the same corner, the cattle need only make a slight adjustment to their posture and none fall over. If we look back at these two clips, both drivers approach the first corner at approximately the same speed and begin braking prior to it. The difference is that driver A continues to slow down, whereas driver B starts accelerating again earlier on during the corner. Once the first corner has been taken, driver A continues at a reasonably steady pace, but driver B accelerates to a faster speed. Therefore, when the vehicle encounters the second corner, it is travelling at a faster speed for driver B compared with driver A. These graphics show that on the first corner, driver B exposes the cattle to a transverse G-force in excess of 0.5 G, whilst driver A's cattle experience 0.35 G. On the second corner, driver B produces a lateral acceleration of 0.4 G, whilst driver A produces 0.31 G. It is also interesting to note that when Animal 3 fell for the second time, it contributed to Animal 5's fall. In turn, Animal 5's loss of stability caused Animal 2 to fall as well. This highlights how fallen livestock can bring down other animals standing beside them, even if those animals would not have fallen because of the vehicle's movement alone. Drivers may also show differences in driving style when braking. In this clip, both drivers are travelling at about 40 km per hour when they approach the traffic lights. Driver B begins braking earlier and slows the vehicle down at a steadier rate. Driver A brakes later and has to increase his braking intensity as he gets closer to the junction. During braking, the pigs transported by driver A experience a deceleration of 0.4 G and slide towards the front of the pen. In contrast, driver B's pigs experienced only 0.23 G during their deceleration and had a gentler stop. Anticipating potential hazards along a route and being prepared to react accordingly can allow a driver to respond to such events calmly and steadily. This helps to limit any disruption to livestock. For example, approaching this corner at a slower speed would have allowed the driver to brake gradually and at a lower intensity when the oncoming car suddenly appeared. When the driver sees the horse and rider approaching round the corner, he brakes gently, and the cattle are almost unaffected by the driving event. We have seen that driving events can disturb livestock. Continual adjustments of posture and lack of rest might predispose animals to fatigue. Slides, falls, and trampling have the potential to cause pain and injury. However, we have also observed that a diligent approach to driving can help to reduce the negative effects of driving events on livestock and consequently safeguard their welfare. Gentle acceleration, braking and cornering, and smooth gear changes will provide livestock with a more comfortable journey. Anticipating potential driving events and preparing for them will reduce the likelihood and severity of any losses of stability for the livestock. For example, braking early to a more suitable speed and changing gear before and in time for corners rather than on them. Travelling on motorways and avoiding minor roads and built-up areas as much as possible will encourage livestock to rest and reduce any discomfort from poor quality road surfaces or repetitive acceleration, braking, cornering and gear changing. Driving in a manner that reduces stress, fatigue and injury in animals will improve animal welfare and is more likely to ensure meat quality in animals transported to slaughter. This chapter of the DVD focuses on the road transport of pigs and identifies the risks that driving events may pose to their welfare. The driver of the vehicle has the primary duty of care for the pigs during travel. Appropriate training for drivers and certified competence are considered valuable tools in achieving high standards of welfare during transport. A 7.5-ton, single-deck, non-articulated livestock vehicle was fitted with video cameras that simultaneously recorded the speedometer, the driver's view of the road ahead, the driver himself, and the pigs in the livestock section. At the same time, a triaxial accelerometer mounted under the floor of the livestock section monitored the longitudinal, transverse, and vertical accelerations produced as the vehicle was driven. A GPS receiver recorded the speed and geographical location of the vehicle. Mixed sex groups of 10 familiar large white cross landrace pigs, approximately 5 to 6 months old and with an average weight of 111 kilograms, were transported at a space allowance of 0.45 square metres per pig. Each pig was spray marked with a unique coloured number so that it could be identified on camera. Each journey was approximately 5 hours long, and the route was divided into 2 journey stages. During the first stage, the vehicle travelled for 50-minute periods on B roads, A roads, and the motorway. After a 30-minute driver rest break, the vehicle travelled along a different route for approximately the same amount of time on each road type as in the first stage of the journey. 2 drivers drove 3 journeys each. Losses of balance were a common response to driving events. Over 90% of losses of balance were preceded by lateral accelerations. on B and A roads, most losses of balance were preceded by acceleration and braking. Slides occurred in each journey and were preceded by accelerations, braking and cornering on B and A roads. Falls were infrequent, but were observed in 5 of the 6 journeys. On B roads, falls were preceded by acceleration, braking and cornering. For the most part of each journey, the frequency of slides and falls varied between 0 and 1 per hour, but the frequency was higher along some sections of the route. Over 40% of accelerations on B and A roads were followed by a loss of balance. There were fewer accelerations of between 0.1 and 0.5 G on A roads than there were on B roads, and even less on motorways. Although the braking intensity used by the driver might feel gentle, the pigs often show a behavioural response. About 40% of braking on B and A roads was followed by a loss of balance. The frequency of hard braking was higher on B roads than on A roads. There was generally less braking on motorways, but it could still affect the stability of the pigs. Most gear changes were followed by a loss of balance. Gear changes were most frequent on B roads and least frequent on the motorway. The graphic shows the acceleration and deceleration as the driver changes gear. This clip shows a smooth gear change, and the pigs are relatively unaffected. Over a third of lateral accelerations on B and A roads were followed by a loss of balance. In some cases, pigs fell over during a corner. Approaching and taking corners at a slower speed reduces the G-force and the severity of driving events for pigs. Combinations of driving events can force pigs to make numerous adjustments in order to maintain their balance. In this example, as the driver accelerates onto the roundabout, he also has to change gear and steer the vehicle. The pigs respond to these changes in G-force by adjusting their footing. On average, there were between 5 and 6 losses of balance per minute on B and A roads, and between 2 and 3 per minute on motorways. The pigs spent almost all of their time standing whilst travelling along B roads in the first stage of the journey. As the journey progressed, the pigs reduced the amount of time spent standing. On motorways, the pigs moved about less and sat down more than they did on B or A roads. In the second stage of the journey, when the vehicle left the motorway and changed to A roads, the amount of standing increased. By the end of the journey, there was less standing than there had been at the start. For those pigs that did rest, the percentage of time spent sitting was greater than the time spent lying. Indeed, the pigs spent over twice as much time sitting down in the second stage of the journey than they had done in the first stage. When the vehicle was stationary during the driver rest breaks, the pigs tended to sit and lie down quite quickly. This speeded up sequence shows that after arriving at the service area, the group begins to sit or lie down. After 3.5 minutes, all pigs are resting, and most are recumbent. Similarly, when the vehicle left the service area, the pigs tended to be disturbed, even though travel was, for the most part, initially on the reasonably smooth motorway. In this clip, when the driver turns the ignition on, the pigs immediately become alert. Once the vehicle starts moving, it only takes 3 minutes before all pigs have either sat up or stood up. The pigs were sometimes disturbed from resting by specific driving events. In this clip, when the vehicle travels over 2 drain covers, the vibrations disturb the pig at the front partition and the pig at the back. In this case, both pigs resume lying within a few seconds of the event. Some pigs are disturbed by other individuals that bump into them as a result of driving events. Here, a pig loses balance and knocks into one that is lying down. It sits up. As this speeded up sequence shows, disturbance through driving events can often lead to pigs moving around the pen. Changing position within a travelling vehicle can make pigs vulnerable to slips or falls. Driving events may cause pigs to become trapped on one side of the pen following a loss of balance or a slide, and this could lead to mounting. In this clip, when the vehicle travels round a corner, the highlighted pig is pressed against the side of the pen by the other pigs, and it mounts. Similarly, a loss of balance on this corner reduces the room available to this pig and causes it to mount. Pigs may be at risk of injury from driving events when in the mount position. In this clip, pig 3, marked in green, has mounted another pig. When the vehicle meets a corner further along the road, the pigs slide about in the livestock section and pig 3 falls. Pigs were also observed to lever one another immediately after a driving event was experienced, if it causes others to bump into them. In this example, when the vehicle corners, it causes this pig to lose balance and knock into another pig, which levers it over its head. Falls could be brought about through levering. With regard to overt aggression, between 1 and 3 head knocks per hour were observed per pig during travel. Different driving styles can lead to a difference in the response of the pigs to driving events. In the first stage of the journey, the pigs transported by driver A lost balance more often than the pigs transported by driver B. The main difference between the two drivers was that driver A had more incidences of braking along A roads in the first stage of the journey compared with driver B. Differences in driving style might also lead to variation in the resting behaviour of pigs. For example, on B roads, in the second stage of the journey, the pigs transported by driver A lay down for only a quarter of the amount of time than the pigs transported by driver B did. When pigs lie down, they are less likely to lose stability. Driving in a manner born out of consideration for the pigs in the rear of the vehicle will have multiple effects. There will be fewer losses of stability. Resting behaviour will be encouraged. Disturbance both directly from driving events and from pigs affected by driving events will be minimised, and resting will continue uninterrupted. These actions will improve the welfare of pigs in transit and may also help to prevent any meat quality problems brought about by transport.
This section of the DVD summarises the main areas where the welfare of young calves may be compromised by driving events during road transport. Providing calves with a smooth journey that allows them to rest and avoids any unnecessary suffering is a key responsibility of the driver of a livestock vehicle. A 7.5-tonne, single-deck, non-articulated livestock vehicle was fitted with video cameras that simultaneously recorded the speedometer, the driver's view of the road ahead, the driver, and the calves in the livestock section. At the same time, a triaxial accelerometer mounted under the floor of the livestock section monitored the longitudinal, transverse, and vertical accelerations produced as the vehicle was driven. A GPS receiver recorded the speed and geographical location of the vehicle. Mixed sex groups of 10 Holstein or Holstein cross beef breed calves, approximately 4 weeks old and with an average weight of 60 kilograms, were transported at a space allowance of 0.34 meters squared per calf. The calves were spray marked with different coloured numbers so they could be individually identified. Each journey was approximately 6 hours long and the route was divided into 2 journey stages. The vehicle initially travelled for approximately an hour on B roads, an hour on A roads and another hour on the motorway. After a 40-minute driver rest break, the vehicle then returned along the same route. 2 drivers drove 3 journeys each. Losses of balance were a common response to driving events. About 80% of losses of balance occurred on B and A roads, and about 20% on motorways. Slides were preceded by accelerations, braking, and cornering on B and A roads. The frequency of slides was variable. They were not observed on many sections of the journey, but occurred at a frequency of 4 per hour on some roads. Falls were infrequent, but occurred on all journeys. For most parts of each journey, there were either no falls, or falls occurred at a frequency of up to once per hour. However, the frequency was higher on some sections of B and A roads. Falls were preceded by acceleration, braking and cornering, but could also occur when calves trampled individuals lying on the floor. When calves fell, they could be prevented from getting up by other calves surrounding them. In general, on B and A roads, most losses of balance were preceded by acceleration. Accelerations of up to 0.5 g were sufficient to cause some calves to fall. Both drivers braked harder on B roads than they did on A roads, and harder on A roads than they did on motorways. Braking can be a particular problem with unforeseen circumstances, as this example of overtaking demonstrates. Had the driver approached the parked van at a slower speed, he would have been able to brake more gently when he then saw the car coming in the opposite direction. Many losses of balance on the motorway were preceded by braking. Braking can occur when a vehicle leaves the motorway, and it is important that drivers brake gently at these high speeds. "20% of losses of balance were preceded by a gear change, and a third of losses of balance followed a gear change. Gear changes may occur in quick succession when pulling away. The deceleration as the driver takes his foot off the accelerator prior to changing gear, and the acceleration after the gear change can cause the calves to be pushed forwards and pulled backwards. In this second clip, the driver uses engine braking to slow the vehicle down in preparation for the roundabout ahead. The deceleration generated from this event is shown on the graph and is sufficient to cause a calf to fall. About 90% of losses of balance were preceded by lateral accelerations, such as cornering. Cornering was frequently associated with falls on B and A roads. Most severe corners, measuring over 0.5 G, occurred on B and A roads. Roundabouts can be a more exaggerated form of corner because the manoeuvre can last longer. When the vehicle needs to exit the roundabout, the right-hand cornering motion abruptly comes to an end, and the driver then suddenly begins cornering to the left. This can cause the animals to slide from one side of the pen to the other. When the vehicle was driven over a poor quality surface on B roads, a loss of balance followed 20% of the time. Calves may be at risk of losing stability where driving events occur together or in rapid succession. In this clip, another vehicle is attempting to join the motorway, but it is not safe for the livestock vehicle to pull into the middle lane. The driver therefore initially brakes and then overtakes. A calf at the back experiences a loss of balance when the driver brakes, and then stumbles over a resting animal when the vehicle commences overtaking. Losses of balance, slides and falls were more frequent on B and A roads than they were on motorways. On average, there were 3 to 4 losses of balance per minute on B and A roads, and 1 to 2 losses of balance per minute on motorways. During the first stage of the journey, the calves spent 95% of their time standing up. The time spent lying down increased during the second stage of the journey. Occasionally, it took multiple attempts for calves to lie down for more than a few seconds. This calf is preparing to lie down. After kneeling down, it doesn't complete the behaviour and instead stands up again. Other calves would actually lie down, only to get up again a few seconds later. This calf in particular didn't manage to lie down for more than a few seconds each time. However, once the vehicle had been stationary at the rest stop for 10 minutes, it was then able to lie down for half an hour before being disturbed by another calf. When some calves were standing and others were lying down, disturbances occurred because of their close proximity to one another at this space allowance. When this individual attempts to stand up, it stumbles and knocks another calf, which immediately rises and tramples another animal. Meanwhile, the initial disturbance caused this calf to in turn disturb a different calf. By the end of the clip, 3 calves have been disturbed from resting by the original calf trying to stand up. Calves were also likely to disturb each other when experiencing a driving event. On a few occasions, calves that had been lying down and were then disturbed and stood up returned to lying after only a few minutes. In this clip, the calf marked in orange lies down, but is almost immediately trampled by another calf behind it, and it stands up again. Five minutes later, it lies back down, suggesting that it has a strong motivation to lie down. When a calf stands up, it can sometimes rise underneath an already standing calf, if they are in close proximity. This meant that calves could get their limbs caught at an awkward angle over another animal's body. This increased the risk of a loss of stability and injury when a driving event occurred. Sometimes 2 limbs would get caught, or even the body. The main difference between the drivers was that driver B produced more lateral accelerations of over 0.5 g on A-road corners compared with driver A. Severe lateral accelerations can easily reduce the stability of the calves. This sequence follows a section of uphill, winding A-road that led many of the calves to lose balance and fall over. Once one animal has gone down, other animals often trip over it and end up falling too in a domino fashion. When the vehicle meets traffic, this calf attempts to adopt a normal stance again, but in doing so, it stands on the body of a fallen calf. When the vehicle accelerates away again, the standing calf cannot maintain its balance and it falls on top of the others. Calves are at risk of losing stability when they experience rapid acceleration, hard braking and cornering, and/or cornering at high speed. They may fall both as a result of driving events, but also if they stumble on another calf already lying on the floor. Calves will lie down during transport and will remain so if undisturbed by driving events or other calves. However, calves can be trampled when lying down and may also be prevented from standing up by other calves surrounding them. Driving steadily and carrying out manoeuvres gently can reduce the intensity of driving events that calves experience, lower the frequency of falls, allow them to lie down, and reduce disturbance to resting.
This programme focuses on the main areas where the welfare of adult cattle may be put at risk by driving events during road transport. The degree to which this occurs will be influenced by how the driver deals with these situations. A 7.5-tonne, single-deck, non-articulated livestock vehicle was fitted with video cameras that simultaneously recorded the speedometer, the driver's view of the road ahead, the driver himself, and the cattle. At the same time, a triaxial accelerometer mounted under the floor of the livestock section monitored the longitudinal, transverse, and vertical accelerations produced as the vehicle was driven. A GPS receiver recorded the speed and geographical location of the vehicle. Groups of 5 Charolais cross steers and heifers approximately 10.5 months old, with an average weight of 370 kilograms, were transported at a space allowance of 1.13 square metres per animal. Each individual was spray marked with a different coloured number so that it could be identified. Each journey involved between 6 and 7 hours of actual travelling time. The route was divided into 2 journey stages of approximately equal duration that were separated by a 30 to 40 minute driver rest break. Within each journey stage, the vehicle travelled for approximately 1 hour on B roads, 1 hour on A roads, and another hour on motorways. 2 drivers drove 3 journeys each. Losses of balance were a common response of the cattle to driving events. On B and A roads, there were approximately 4 losses of balance per minute, whilst on motorways, there was less than 1 loss of balance per minute. In general, Most losses of balance followed rapid changes in longitudinal g-force, for example, acceleration and braking. Over 80% of losses of balance followed lateral accelerations, for example, cornering. On average, there were at least 2 slides per hour on B and A roads. Falls were less frequent, and in most journeys, no falls were observed. However, when they did occur, they were likely to have posed a serious risk of injury. Both slides and falls were caused by a variety of driving events on B and A roads. Fallen cattle were also at further risk due to trampling or other cattle falling on top of them. In this clip, the lateral acceleration produced by the speed at which the driver takes the roundabout causes the heifer marked number 5 to lose balance and fall. Other cattle stumble and fall on top of 5, and one animal kicks her. In this sequence, an animal falls at the side of the pen, and another follows suit and falls on top of it. An additional animal then tramples them and repeatedly kicks out with its hind leg, eventually catching one of the fallen animals in the head. An animal at the rear of the pen then also trips over them. When a driver accelerates away from a standstill too quickly, the cattle can slide towards the rear of the vehicle. Cattle experienced accelerations of up to 0.5 g, approximately 4 times per minute on B roads, and approximately 3 times per minute on A roads. In some cases, a slide can also reduce the amount of room available to an individual, and like this animal, they may fall. Decelerations of up to 0.5 g were encountered by cattle approximately 3 times per minute on B roads and twice per minute on A roads. Hard braking not only disturbs cattle, it might also cause discomfort and injury if animals are pressed up against walls or partitions during a slide. In this clip, a dog unexpectedly runs out into the road, and the driver brakes suddenly to avoid hitting it. The rapid slide by the cattle meant that the animal nearest the camera had the weight of the other 4 cattle pressed against it as it hit the front partition. The intensity with which this happens can clearly be seen as the partition buckles. Such scenarios are rare, but braking can have similar effects in situations that are more commonplace. In this clip, the vehicle enters a portion of motorway where the speed is restricted to a maximum of 50 miles per hour. When the driver brakes, the cattle experience a deceleration of 0.2 g. They are disturbed and begin moving around the pen. Gear changes are a common driving event on B and A roads, and abrupt gear changes can cause losses of balance. On B and A roads, about 20% of losses of balance were preceded by a gear change, and at least a third of gear changes were followed by a loss of balance. This graphic shows the deceleration as the driver takes his foot off the accelerator, changes gear, and reapplies pressure to the accelerator pedal. Changing gear smoothly and steadily can reduce the degree of deceleration and acceleration that livestock experience. cornering was the most common driving event to precede losses of balance. Approximately 20% of corners on B roads were followed by a loss of balance. Some roads contain multiple corners of alternate direction and in quick succession. When multiple corners are taken too quickly, cattle sometimes barely have enough time to recover their balance from the initial event before they enter the next. In this study, poor road surfaces on their own were not a common cause of losses of balance. Here, when the vehicle crosses from a section of resurfaced road onto older, pitted tarmac, the cameras start to shake, the driver bounces in his seat, the cattle lose their balance, and the accelerometer starts to register greater vibrations. Changes in G-force along multiple axes can prove to be more of a challenge for cattle when trying to maintain their balance. Here, the driver is preparing to turn left and so brakes and changes gear twice before cornering. In this clip, a combination of a pothole, a gear change, and the corner all precede Animal 5's loss of stability. The intensity of accelerations, braking, and corners was generally higher on B roads compared with A roads or motorways. The vast majority of losses of balance were experienced on B and A roads. In general, approximately 20% of driving events on B and A roads were followed by losses of balance. The majority of slides were observed on B roads. Although falls were rare, most occurred on A roads. Cattle spent at least 98% of the travelling time standing. Cattle rarely lay down, but when they did, it occurred during the second stage of the journey. Disturbance to resting occurred when a standing individual tried to manoeuvre around a resting animal, when a standing animal lost balance and trampled a lying individual, and when the vehicle left the motorway and joined a roundabout. The two drivers showed some individual preferences in how they tackled the route. Whilst travelling on the motorway, driver B spent more time at speeds over 110 km per hour or 68 miles per hour compared with driver A. However, this seemed to have little effect on the frequency of losses of balance on this road type. When cornering on B roads, driver B produced more lateral accelerations of between 0.5 g and 2 g in comparison with driver A. As cattle will tend to stand throughout a 6-hour journey, they are vulnerable to falls when travelling around corners and can easily trip each other up if one animal is already on the floor. Negotiating corners at a slow and steady pace, changing gears smoothly, and accelerating and braking gently can help dampen the effect of driving events on the behaviour of cattle and provide them with a smoother journey. Animal welfare is an important aspect of farming, and the highest standards for the care of animals should be the goal of everyone involved in the food production chain. This is especially the case when considering the transportation of livestock, as there are many factors that can put the welfare of these animals at risk. The safe, efficient and humane transport of animals requires more than the avoidance of injury and suffering. It also requires care and attention to their comfort and well-being. The major responsibility for the welfare of animals in transit rests with the driver of the vehicle. The way in which the vehicle is driven can influence both the quality of the journey and the quality of the food produced from the livestock. This video deals with aspects of the welfare of livestock during transport that can be directly influenced by the driver of the vehicle. Legislation and codes of practice emphasise the importance of driver training and competence in the avoidance of injury and unnecessary suffering to the animals. When driving a vehicle containing livestock, the driver may not always be fully aware of how his or her quality of driving affects the behaviour of the animals, and which aspects are the most important to consider. The speed that the vehicle is driven and the manner in which the driver brakes, accelerates and corners have an impact on the welfare of the animals by affecting their stability, as well as their ability to rest whilst on the vehicle. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs funded both a research project and the production of this training video to demonstrate the relationships between driver behaviour and driving events with the behavioural responses of sheep during transit. Video cameras were installed on a livestock vehicle to simultaneously record the behaviour of the driver, their view of the road ahead, the speed of the vehicle, and the behaviour of the sheep during a journey. The intensity of driving events, such as braking and gear changes, were determined by measuring the changes in speed of the vehicle. The magnitudes of corners taken were measured using an accelerometer. This device displayed the G-force experienced when a corner was taken, and the corners were then described as low, medium or high intensity. Groups of 10 Scottish black-faced hogs were spray-marked to aid identification and loaded onto a single-decked vehicle at a space allowance of 0.4 square metres per sheep. The vehicle was driven on a variety of road types: farm tracks, minor roads, town roads, single carriageway main roads, and dual carriageways or motorways. Road type and road surface, the speed of the vehicle, the occurrence of braking, cornering and gear changing all have effects on the stability of the sheep, as shown by the frequency of swaying, losses of balance and falls. These different driving events also affect the ability of the sheep to settle down, as shown by their degree of movement, interactions with each other and the vehicle, their change in position and posture, and their ability to lie down, rest, relax and ruminate. In this study, few falls were observed, but losses of balance occurred approximately once a minute. Around 80% of these losses of balance could be explained by driving events, such as acceleration, braking, stopping, cornering, gear changing, and driving on an uneven road surface. When a driver has to brake suddenly, the sheep are thrown forward, in this case when approaching a road junction. If we look again, the rapid braking has an obvious effect on the stability of the sheep. Braking steadily in preparation for a junction allows the vehicle to come to a slow halt and results in little disturbance for the sheep. Rapid acceleration, such as moving off at a set of traffic lights, can also affect the stability of the sheep and cause them to lose their balance. Abrupt changes in gear can make the sheep adjust their footing to maintain their balance. The driver approaches this corner at a relatively high speed, and it is deceptively sharp. When the driver takes this high-intensity corner, the sheep lose their balance and one falls over. Looking at this again, we can see that the sheep in the centre fails to maintain its stability. Not all driving events affect sheep behaviour. Only about 15% were associated with loss of stability by the sheep. When a sharp corner is anticipated, such as the approach to a roundabout, the driver prepares for the event by braking at a more gradual rate and taking the corner smoothly. The consequence for the sheep is little or no disturbance. The few falls that did occur mainly followed a combination of events that were sufficient to disrupt the stability of the sheep. For example, a gear change followed by braking. Just under half of the disturbances to resting behaviour, that is, the sheep getting up from lying down or stopping rumination, followed a specific driving event. In this example, braking in the approach to a roundabout disturbs the sheep and causes one to stand up. Road type can have a major influence on the behaviour of sheep during transport. Although sheep are driven at higher speed along a motorway, there are very few driving events. Consequently, the journey for the sheep is much smoother, and there are fewer losses of balance. As shown in this graph, the frequency of losses of balance is far greater on a minor road or a main single carriageway than on a motorway. The sheep rest and lie down and ruminate more on a long motorway section than on single carriageways. In this example, the vehicle has been on the motorway for almost 1 hour. All 10 sheep lie down and some of them ruminate. They are disturbed when the vehicle comes off the motorway and corners. If we compare this to what happens when the vehicle is travelling on a minor road, we can see that there is little or no resting behaviour. The general stability of the sheep is affected. They struggle to maintain their balance and show signs of restlessness. Different drivers will have different ways of driving. These individual differences can have an effect on the behaviour of the sheep. This can be shown by looking at the influence driving style has on the ability of the animals to rest and on their general stability. Driver A drives at a steady pace and handles driving events such as corners at lower speeds. Driver B drives at a faster pace, and as a consequence, the sheep experience a greater number of high-intensity corners than those driven by driver A. Although a difference in driving style may not always have an obvious effect on the stability of the sheep, their resting behaviour may be affected. The sheep driven by driver B display signs of restlessness throughout the journey. In this example, some sheep are lying down, whilst others are butting each other and struggling to maintain balance. In this study, a difference in the resting behaviour of the sheep was most obvious when the sheep were driven by driver A along a section of motorway in the later part of the journey. Although the sheep were driven at high speed along the motorway section, they were provided with a long, smooth period in which to lie down and ruminate. Overall, driver B drove faster and with a greater frequency of high-intensity cornering. When travelling with driver B, there was less opportunity for the sheep to rest. We have seen that the way in which the vehicle is driven can affect both the stability of the animals and their ability to rest. Careful driving can reduce the severity of many of the welfare problems that sheep can experience during transit. There is less risk of injury, the sheep don't have to make frequent adjustments to maintain their balance, and they are given an opportunity to rest.